All right. So, every week on ZASLOW Show 2.0, we have It's Still Real to Me. That's our pro wrestling podcast, which, of course, is every Saturday covering all the big stories in the world of pro wrestling. But sometimes we got to intersect in the middle of the week on ZASLOW Show 2.0. And joining us here, all right, we're talking Emmy Award-winning sportscaster, Fight TV host of The Extreme Life with Matt Hardy. And right now, just scrambling around trying to cover what might be the biggest story in the history of pro wrestling. Jon Alba joining us here. That's not hyperbole, right? This might be the biggest story in the history of pro wrestling, the potential sale of World Wrestling Entertainment, correct?
Yeah, I think it's probably a top two story. I think you always have to have the Chris Benoit situation in there just because of the ramifications that it had for the entire industry, but it's right up there with it, no doubt about it.
So I want you to explain, because look, we're for the most part, we're a sports show, but I mean, look, by now, all my listeners know I love pro wrestling. I cover pro wrestling. We talk about all kinds of stuff, but the pro wrestling media is a really interesting media. Now, I happen to find you as one of the more responsible guys. That's why I wanted to get you on the show and talk a little bit about this, but it's really difficult. And I think the last 48 hours have probably proven if you're just a wrestling fan, it can be really difficult to sift through what's real and what's not real, right?
It can, and I appreciate the kind words for the record. I do think I'm a little different than your traditional wrestling media member just because I've covered the NBA, I've covered the NFL, Major League Baseball, NASCAR, college sports, real court cases, etc. So my approach might be a little different than that of some others. Not to say their approach is wrong necessarily, but it's a little different. And I think sometimes people get a little caught up in chatter in wrestling media, and no doubt there's chatter in a situation like this. There's certainly chatter, and oftentimes where there is smoke, there is fire. But I do always caution that, especially for a story of this magnitude, you need to make sure that your sources are incredibly credible and that you are getting multiple sources to independently confirm information, or at least be very close in the information that they give you before you go out and report something.
Let's talk about what happened with Stephanie a couple days ago. So, look, 6-7 months ago, whatever it was, when Vince originally stepped down, Stephanie McMahon was on leave. We don't really know why, but she was on leave, and she eventually came back to kind of help steady the ship as Vince had stepped down to retire. And then a couple days ago, she goes back to her leave and puts out a statement that actually she is officially resigning from WWE, where she has worked for more than, or for probably just about half her life, maybe even more than half her life. It may be personal, but it's really difficult, Jon, to not line up all the circumstantial evidence that it comes right after Vince is back. So what are we to make of that?
I don't want to speculate on anything. I'm very careful not to speculate on anything. But what we do know factually is that she took a leave of absence last year. Then when the Vince stuff started happening, she became the interim CEO. Then she became the permanent co-CEO. As the letters were being sent back and forth between Vince McMahon and the WWE board of directors at the end of December, the board of directors that Stephanie McMahon sat on unanimously rebuked his attempts at trying to come back into the fold as executive chair of the board. Whether she directly voted against it, we don't know. She could have not voted or whatever, but she was part of a board that unanimously tried to reject Vince's attempt at being reinstated as executive chair, which, as we know, he was ultimately successful in doing. Then just a few days later, we see her step back officially and resign. So you can leave it up to yourself to try to plant some seeds there and figure out how that all plays out. But it certainly raises questions. And it's a pretty temperamental situation.
Is there any reason to believe, and I know right now in the statement that came out, not just from Stephanie, but also from Vince McMahon a few days ago, we got great executives in place and none of their roles are changing. Can the WWE fan who, look, I'm a lifelong fan. WWE has just been on fire the last 6-7 months since Triple H took over. Can the WWE fan believe that Vince is not going to try and, I mean, he could do what he wants, I guess, that Vince is not going to get involved in the day-to-day operations as far as creative and the TV shows go?
Well, he doesn't quite have unilateral control to do that just yet, even as executive chair of the board of directors, because he's not the CEO of the company at this point. Nick Khan currently is. And because he is still under federal investigation, he doesn't unilaterally have that ability to change those positions just yet. Now, should a sale happen, and that's as far as I understand it legally, there's a lot of juncture that comes with that too. I'm not claiming to be a lawyer here, but if there were to be a sale, hypothetically speaking, and the company were to go private, well, then you're no longer under federal watch because it's a privately owned company at that point. And he could, in theory, position himself back into that. Or if there are certain terms of agreements in a sale that would position him in a certain way, then yeah, potentially he could do that. There are definitely paths for Vince to get that creative control again. As things stand right now, that doesn't seem to be the case. But like you said in that statement, there's no intent for things to change. Well, there was no intent for Stephanie McMahon to step down as co-CEO either as of 72 hours ago, and here we are.
Okay, so a couple nights ago, Twitter, it's trending everywhere that the Saudis are buying WWE. What were your initial thoughts when you first saw that? Where do we stand right now? Because what I thought when I first saw it, I don't think some of these guys out there with the dirt sheets are lying, that it's a done deal. It's been sold and WWE's going back to being private. But I don't see a board of directors approving such a massive situation in such a short period of time. At the very least, okay, maybe the Saudis will be the front runner, but you're going to go take that offer out to every other, Fortune 500 company in the world and try and have them beat that offer. And that's not happening in the span of like 2 days, John.
Mm-hmm. I want to preface my answer here by saying that just like in pro wrestling, card is subject to change and things change by the moment. They certainly do. And I had heard the rumblings of the Saudi chatter. And when I saw the reports initially, I was surprised, but I didn't want to jump the gun on anything because I knew there were pretty severe ramifications of reporting something like you said, potentially the biggest story in professional wrestling history, especially if it were to be sold to an entity that is involved with the Saudi Arabian government here. My thought process from the start was it was peculiar. One, because of the timeline that you mentioned, it would be like record fast pace. Two, they had just reportedly hired JP Morgan to help facilitate a sale. And in order for that to happen, the Saudis would have had to have come in with an $11-12 billion deal right off the gate.
They'd have to come in with cash in a suitcase.
Right, exactly. Take it now, which, to be fair, they could do that if they truly wanted to. But it just would have happened really quickly. And it also would have meant that Vince McMahon, as the majority shareholder, despite not being the executive chairman, would have been negotiating behind the board's back. And that could be a sketchy situation as well. So I was a little taken back by that. And that was why I was really trying to carefully vet this out. And I stayed up all night long, Tuesday into Wednesday, trying to get people. And while no one would deny it, because I don't think anyone really knew per se, no one was confirming it. And that spoke pretty loudly to me. And it wasn't until Wednesday morning that I was on the record able to get a pretty high standing source in WWE who I would trust their word on a situation like this, that at this moment in time, again, frame those words, at this moment in time, there was no sale and there was no agreed upon sale. And there is a distinction there too, an agreement versus a signed, sealed, delivered sale. For something to be signed, sealed, delivered, it in theory could take months for something like that to happen. Eric Bischoff, back in 2001, my podcast co-host of Strictly Business, had a deal agreed upon to purchase WCW with his investment group. Well, just because it was agreed upon, it didn't mean that it was going to come to fruition. And as we know, it did not come to fruition. So it is important to have that distinction between those words and remember that words do matter in reporting.
Could going back to being private, can that be a good thing for the WWE fan?
Sure. I think there's a lot of different possibilities that could be good per se, but there are different conditions that come with going private. Who's put in charge? When UFC was sold to Endeavor, one of the caveats of it was that Dana White had to be given control as president and run the content of the company. So there could be conditions of a potential sale, whether it's to Saudi Arabia, to Comcast, Fox, Disney, whatever it may be, that Vince McMahon could maintain control, or maybe it's somebody else. Who's to say? We don't know. We're not privy to those conversations at this moment in time, which, as I said, my thought process is, as things stand, and we're recording this here a little earlier than it's airing, so these circumstances could change at a whim as well. And I hope that's not the case, because I want this to air as it is. But we don't really know. All I can do with my best as a reporter is to try to confirm where things stand at this moment in time.
Based on people you've spoken to, are superstars nervous?
Yes. People are. I don't know if, I mean, there are some who are nervous, but it's definitely interest, intrigue, and concern.
Wow. Finally here, non-business related. What's your favorite thing going on right now in pro wrestling? What do we love the most? Is it obviously Bloodline?
It's probably my favorite storyline going on in pro wrestling right now. Yeah, it's been really entertaining. I've enjoyed watching Sami Zayn come into his own and seeing Kevin Owens kind of get back to that spot where I think we all knew he'd be capable of being. I'm excited at the prospect of Cody returning, which is going to be something that's going to be a pretty intriguing part of television, hopefully. I've enjoyed seeing NXT kind of start to show some glimmers of the old NXT in a way. I'm enjoying what we're starting to see from different players in AEW. I like the new aesthetic of AEW. I think that's a good thing. I'm biased. I really enjoy the Matt Hardy, Ethan Page storyline that I wish we got to see a little more of on AEW Dynamite. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like in pro wrestling right now. There really is. And that's why this story coming out of nowhere has caught so many like a smack in the face, because we certainly were not expecting things to unfold in the way they have.
Yeah, we'd rather just focus on like the really great product that they've been putting out, right? You know? Yeah, it's weird.
But this whole situation, man, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but this whole situation is like the McMahon Helmsley stuff from the 90s and the early 2000s playing out in real time.
Well, I don't know if you watch HBO Succession, but I feel like we're watching.
Everyone keeps saying.
It's so obvious. I feel like we're watching Succession play out in real time here.
That's what everyone keeps saying. I haven't personally taken a dive into that.
What a show!
Everyone keeps saying that, so I might have to check it out.
John, tell everyone you got a lot going on. Like you said, Eric Bischoff, Matt Hardy. Tell everyone how they can check you out. Go ahead.
Yeah, you could go check me out. Like I said, I host shows on fight.tv. You can go check that out. The Extreme Life of Matt Hardy, which drops every single Friday, wherever you get your podcasts, at extremehardy.com, and Strictly Business with Eric Bischoff, 83weeks.com, wherever you get your podcasts as well. I also have a wrestling-oriented Patreon, wrestlingacordingtoalba.com, and I have a one-on-one consulting program for those who want to get into media work, doing stuff like what you get to do every single day here. That is albamediaschool.com.
John, excellent job. Thanks a lot for joining us here. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Cool. Thanks, man. So I'll tag you in the links when it goes out tomorrow morning.
Hopefully it's all still accurate at that time. I think it will be.
I think it'll be okay. I think it'll be good.
We'll see. If it doesn't, what's tomorrow? Thursday?
Yeah.
We can do a make good tomorrow. If something dramatically changes, just let
me know. I appreciate that. We'll do it again, though, for sure. I mean, definitely something before WrestleMania, where it's such a great time of year,
No doubt. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Take care.